I'm coming into you live from Australia. Thank you very much for having me here at the conference. I'm going to talk to you today about building a data-driven economy. I want to talk a little bit about the opportunities and the dependencies to building a data-driven economy based on some of the experience that we've had here in Australia. So I've been working on open data for about 3 years. Currently in charge of data.gov.au, as well as the National Map project, which is a spatial mapping tool that we use for government data in Australia. We also look across in our team, I guess, whole of government in terms of data sharing and data publishing. So we live, breathe, and walk the data walk every day. In terms of building a data-driven economy, there's a few things that we know. We know that there are significant opportunities, largely because there's a huge community out there, the entire world, who are able to build clever things, do new innovation, create new industries, create new insights with government data than any single team or single department or even single government may be resourced or motivated to do. So part of the challenge and part of the opportunity is to actually overcome that traditional government approach to data, which is all about being a king in the castle, which is really the sort of traditional government mentality more broadly, and start to realize that government is just another node in the network. Government is part of the internet in the same way that every other organization or company or individual is. So if government can start to play as a node in the network rather than a king in the castle, I think we have some significant opportunities that can be realized. So first of all, what do we mean by data-driven? I mean, it's a term that's thrown around a lot, and I want to talk about 3 specific ideas about what we mean by data-driven. The first one is the ability to have an adaptive response. The second one is around emerging industries and research. And then the third one is about the idea that we can build a service and knowledge ecosystem for our various jurisdictions. So I'm going to explore these 3 ideas, and then I'm going to talk to you about some of the dependencies to be able to enable a data-driven economy. I think a lot of people talk about the opportunities and benefits, and there's been countless studies now about the economic opportunities that data provides. But at the same time, if your data isn't available, isn't reliable, if the industry or community have low confidence in the way that your data is available, then you will never see the benefits realized from that data. So I'll go into some of those dependencies as well. So first of all, data-driven, adaptive responses. Adaptive data gives you an increased capability to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on, and then to make small iterative changes to your policy or program or service or product, so that you can actually adapt to the changing times. You can adapt to people's needs. You can adapt to new opportunities, new challenges, what's going on out there. Traditionally in government, you would have a policy which is developed, then you implement the policy, then you review whether the policy has worked or not. And of course, by the end of the policy implementation, there's a natural motivation to say it's worked just fine. If we can measure from the very start, before the policy even gets implemented, before the service even gets implemented, before the product is even in production, if you can actually start to understand what success looks like and start to measure and monitor and track that over time and understand what the trends look like, then you are in a very confident position to make iterative changes, knowing, because you can see what the impact of that iterative change is. If you're not measuring as you go, then an iterative change, understanding the impact of that iterative change is very hard. So taking a data-driven approach to our policy services, products, etc., gives all of us, private and public sector, a fantastic opportunity to take a truly adaptive response, because we can adapt in response to the changing environment, to changing expectations, to changing needs with confidence, and know what the impact of that change or those changes have been. So the first most important opportunity, I think, from a adaptive responses, from a data-driven economy perspective, is the ability for private sector and public sector to take a more adaptive response. This allows us to respond far more quickly and resiliently to the changing world as we know it. It improves decision-making up front, it improves decision-making throughout, and improves decision-making to close down. But this means you have to measure. You have to put in place the frameworks and the training and the understanding about how to actually use data to inform your progress as you go. The second opportunity from a data-driven economy, obviously, is emerging industries and research. The research sector has always used a lot of data and wanted and took a lot of data. It's only been in the last little while that we've seen the research sector start to contribute data back. And that's been a real culture change here in Australia. There has been a drive to start recognizing, and I know that that's happening elsewhere in the world, but a drive to start recognizing data publication at the same level as publications, as paper publications. And because researchers are heavily driven by that kind of peer recognition, having recognition of data helps create a motivation to want to publish the data out of a research project as well. There are some research sectors that are extraordinarily good at sharing data and have reaped the benefits of that, but there's still a lot that don't do it naturally or by default. So being able to share data in the research sector means we're going to get more rapid turnaround of research, more effective research that isn't having to duplicate effort. And on the back of that, then you obviously get emerging industries as well. More companies being able to, and entrepreneurs being able to build, being able to innovate themselves, being able to build on the back of research, being able to leverage data from not just the public sector, but also the research sector and potentially in the future, even the private sector. I would argue that data is moving from a product-based economy to a service-based economy in exactly the same way that software did over the last sort of 20 to 30 years. So understanding that data is moving towards being a services-based industry helps you understand that the opportunities are in how we use the data, not in how we sell the data. In Australia, we're moving very strongly away from selling government data and very strongly towards open by default, free by default, with the understanding that it is the free access to government data that creates these opportunities. But I'll come to dependencies again in a little bit. So better sharing of, so data-driven economy is also about emerging industries and research. New technologies come along every day, and this presents new opportunities, new ways that citizens use technology and engage with each other and communicate. You know, I still know government departments that are looking at a mobile strategy, and that's, you know, been running for some time now. But, you know, just over the hill, we've got augmented reality, virtual reality, embedded computing, when people, you know, actually embed systems into their bodies on purpose for augmented capabilities. So we're going to have new technologies increasingly being introduced, and so we need we need data to make good decision making, to build a good response, but also to enable these emerging industries that will pop up around these new technologies and new customer expectations and user expectations. Finally, from an emerging industries and research perspective, you also have the opportunity to create multidisciplinary responses. So a statistician will look at data in a particular way, a geek will look at data, a programmer will look at data in a particular way, a data visualization person, a story person, a science person, a policymaker. Everyone looks at the same data and gets different information out of it. So by taking a data-driven approach where you pull together a multidisciplinary team, you can actually get a lot more value and a lot more interest and a lot more useful outcomes from your data. So open data actually enables these multidisciplinary teams to come together to form new products, to form new industries, to form new knowledge and new research, which is, I think, a critical component. Because if your data is locked up in your organization or in your industry or behind a paywall or an education wall, then it's only going to be that community that has access to get the value out of the data. So it's by opening it up that you get new value. Okay, and the third area is this idea of a service knowledge ecosystem. When you open up your data and you make it, importantly, programmatically available, so not just available for a download, but available through, you know, so it's easy to find, has good metadata, has good API support. When you make your data available in a high quality way, then you can start to see a competitive marketplace of lots of people building services and building information around that data. Traditionally in government, the idea is I have the data, I build the system, I do the service delivery. But what if we were to flip that on its head and see government as a platform? see government as a platform on which an entire ecosystem of services and knowledge may be developed using private sector, public sector, other jurisdictions, citizens themselves who are more able to solve their own needs today than ever before. This idea that we don't have to build all of the end user services in one place, but rather build the infrastructure in a way that can support many flowers to bloom. I think this creating a competitive marketplace is a new idea for a lot of people in government, but I think it's quite compelling, particularly when so many governments are under fiscal constraints and limitations. I think once you get a lot of systems, or at least a few systems, available in this way publicly, you can start to create mashable systems. I can start to mash up data, content, and services from multiple governments, multiple jurisdictions, private sector, research sector, to create completely new things that are not just cross-disciplinary, but cross-sector, transnational, these kinds of things. So this idea of creating a system that is mashable, not just creating your system, but realizing that what you build is actually part of a global system, and starting to understand that this systemic change towards a mashable world is how we're going to see a lot more opportunities out of this data-driven economy. And I guess that final thing around it creates, this ecosystem creates many paths to success. So as an entrepreneur, I could choose to specifically create the best possible service for elderly citizens in my town. And I would choose to pull in data and content and services from federal government, state government, local government, private sector, maybe from a research mob down the road, maybe from a school down the road, maybe from the pharmacy information, maybe pull together some of the health services. When you have your mind open to all the possibilities, then there are many paths to actually serve the changing needs of our communities. All right, so I've sort of talked a little bit about some of the opportunities and what I mean by, I guess, a bit of some of the ideas around what a data-driven economy can look like in practice. But the problem is you can have all the best ideas in the world, but at the end of the day, it depends on how you implement them. That's where it gets real. So let me talk a little bit about how to enable a data-driven economy. 3 things I'm going to talk briefly about. Foundations. What are the foundations of a data-driven economy? How to have leadership and how to get transformation through a data-driven economy. Foundations. The first most important thing for driving a data-driven economy is that you need to have reusable and modular infrastructure. You need to have your data available. Everyone wants to jump straight to the beautiful visualizations or to the new company or to the startup that makes $1 million or $1 billion. Everyone wants to jump straight to the end point, but you can't have a sustainable endpoint without having the foundations in place, the bricks and mortar. The foundations for data-driven economy is, strangely enough, data. That means you have to have empathy to data users. You need to build systems that people that want to use data would love to use. This means high quality. This means systems that support, good programmatic access, systems that don't go down at 5:30 p.m. on a Friday and come back up at 9 a.m. on a Monday, systems that are reliable, and systems that invoke confidence. So in Australia, we've taken a lot of work. We've done a lot of work around improving data literacy in government over the last few years in terms of data publishing, and we've got a lot more data sets publicly available than we've ever had. But we're now transitioning into the next big phase is to improve public confidence in government data. When you have 7,000 or 8,000 data sets that you can search, but you don't know which ones you can rely on, then you tend to just not rely on any of them. So we'll be putting in place a quality framework so that when a person searches data.gov.au, they can look at any data set and have an immediate understanding of how high quality that data is from a format perspective, an API perspective, and from a descriptive metadata perspective. We're looking at putting this in place over the next month or two, so please stay tuned. But the point is, you need to have in place programs and capability to drive a high public confidence in your data infrastructure. And if there's high confidence, then people will start to experiment and build and create those benefits that we all want to see from a data-driven economy. So reliable modular infrastructure. Literacy is obviously important, data and technology literacy, not just for the data specialists, You need to have, analytics people, you need to have infrastructure people, you need to have database people, you need to have a lot of specialists. But what about the other 99% of your organization or of your society? Starting to teach people to engage with technology and to engage with data in an intuitive way, in the same way that people are learning to be intuitive on the internet, is incredibly important to getting data-driven thinking and design and planning into everyday activities of people. If someone wants to find something out, rather than sending out a survey, is there the information already available somewhere by somebody in an authoritative way that I can go and reuse? Trying to get into this remix, reuse, build on the shoulders of giants mentality is critical. Otherwise, we end up seeing everybody, or almost everybody, continually reinventing the wheel with data. And I think the other foundation there is making your data, whether you're a company or a government or a community organization, making your data and content and services mashable by other people. It will make it easier for you to serve your own information up, because if it's mashable, you can create new interesting front ends for your own systems today, but it also makes it easy for other people to also build on the top of that. So secondly, leadership. You've got to make this stuff real. If you don't have demonstrators, if you can't show what you mean by data-driven economy, if you can't show examples that show other people the path, then it'll always be a fluffy conversation that doesn't make sense. You need to show through doing. You need to have exemplars. You need to give people permission to experiment. You need to have places that people can go and try new things. In Australia, we have a national competition which is run by the community, which I'm involved in as a volunteer, called GovHack. And GovHack is about getting thousands of people, civic-minded civic-minded people together to play with government data to create new insights, new products, new tools, new visualizations, new 3D printed artifacts. And what happens is a lot of people from government have never had that opportunity to work in a multidisciplinary team. So it actually ends up building capability around new ways to work in a collaborative environment. So building some of that capability and giving people permission and encouragement to explore, to experiment, and to work collaboratively is critical. And finally, transformation. You need to consume your own systems in this way. You need to encourage public engagement. You need to become that node in the network that I spoke about before. So I think I'll finish on that note for now, but basically I wanted to sort of cover the idea of a data-driven economy isn't just a buzzword. It is real. It comes down to those different ideas of having adaptive, responsive, supporting emerging industries and research, and supporting an ecosystem of service and knowledge delivery. But you have to have your foundations put in place. You have to understand and build the structures upon which a data-driven economy can be built. Otherwise, you will be building on sand and it will not be sustainable. I look forward to your questions, and thank you very much for having me, and I wish I could be there in person. Thank you so much.